Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. My name is Katie Gideon, and I will be the on-camera facilitator for this social. I want to give a huge shout out to my co-facilitator, Maya, who you will see in the chat. We are happy to be here. I feel like it's not, my weekend is not complete without some sort of social event with my family. I am already seeing everyone in the chat with our socialers. I just love small names. You guys are, it's always fun to see everybody. And I always appreciate it. It brings a smile to my face. So we are glad that you're here. Also, if this is your first social, make sure you can share as much or as little in the chat as you want. Just double check that it is set to everyone. That comes to the larger Silk and Sonder fam on the chat. If its default is always hosts and panelists, and Zoom does like to track back and forth. So just double check, especially if you want to share in the larger group. And we would certainly like to know, you can put in the chat if this is your first social or your first setup social or your first social in a while. Because I already, like I said, seeing some recognize the names in the chat. Hey, Lisa, welcome. We love new people. We're always glad for you to join. And then just as like full disclaimer, this can be a little bit of a sensory overload. And that's because we've got quite a few people that are here in the chat. So the chat may be going quite a bit. Elizabeth, welcome. And so you can always stop the chat by clicking on one of the messages above and then you kind of scroll as you own. But if that gets too overwhelming, you can close it. If I get too much, you can mute me, you can mute the music, because I feel like it becomes that dance of, are you here to connect socially, which is always a great reason, or maybe you're here for inspiration, or maybe you're here because you've set aside this time to put pen to paper and get your page all set up. There is no right or wrong way to participate in this social. Participate in as much or as little as you want. And certainly we want you to take away from this for what you want, for your secure journey. But either way, we are glad that you're here and we are excited to get started. So, as always, please be kind and courteous to yourself and others. No promotion or spam. Respect everyone's privacy. No hate speech or bullying. Limit repetitive product and accessory questions, though we do like to have those conversations. We just don't want it to detract completely from the prompts and why we're here. But we love sharing book recommendations, app recommendations, stickers. We love stickers. So definitely feel free to kind of include that in the conversation. Just don't want it to be the main focus. And then, as always, Maya and I have some information, but we will most likely redirect those customer care inquiries to our team, hello@sonder.com, because we do not have all of that specific information, especially around those. But if there's something major that you would like us to flag, you can send it to host and panelists to do that. And so, as always, Sonder Socials are a tool to help elevate your emotional health through the power of community, but you are responsible for your own emotions, well-being, and decisions. So we love to embrace all the emotions, all the feels. I know some people have had some tough weeks, and I was already seeing in the chat that unfortunately they need someone who lost a pet. That's always tough. I always say you do not have to put on your best smile or your best attitude for this. You can come exactly as you are, and we want to be there for that. But at the same time, if you've had an amazing, spectacular week and you want to continue that momentum, please feel free to share in the chat with that. We love to celebrate all of the highs, acknowledge all of those lower points, but still being able to connect with each of us as we kind of go on this journey together. So we are embracing this month's theme of independence, which, as I said, I'll put on my best smile, but I feel like I was in kind of all my feels this past weekend. And part of it is the battling the need for perfection and having to embrace all those decisions. And so I feel like that kind of was on the maybe opposite end of it. So I wanted to look at the duality of that, where it's one of those, I feel like there's always a great moment. The last quote I used was, you want flowers, plant a garden. You don't always have to wait for someone to bring you flowers. If you want to acquire said flowers, you can do it yourself. But then I also feel like there's that kind of flip side, which does go into the mind map a little bit. I mean, full transparency, I kind of did the mind map first and I came to this based on the weekend that I've had. But it becomes one of those things of like what you're good at versus what you have to do or what you want to do. And so I feel like that was kind of the opposite end of independence. I was just having that moment of, can you independence too well? And so it's kind of striking that balance of really taking to heart what Mayha put in the letter of independence shouldn't be isolation. But then I feel like that becomes one of those like, if it's not perfect, do we build up walls? If it's not perfect, do we not talk about things? Do we not share things? And I feel like that adds to the independent ability or even the courage to be more independent and say, this is the boundary I'm setting, or this is the direction I'm going, or these are the decisions I'm making. If it doesn't quite hit the standards, which I feel like goes into the conforming, and that kind of thing. Exactly, Andrea. It's also, Andrea, it's also knowing when to ask for help. And I feel like that's another one of those things of delegation and asking for help is a hard thing. It is something that I still work on a regular basis. And I think it becomes I've just gotten so used to not necessarily being around as many people like my close friends and family because I've always lived elsewhere for whatever choice. I'm not blaming it on those choices or the causation caused by those, but it's that thing I've become so reliant that I don't even bring it up because it's like, well, what are you going to do? Provide moral support over the phone? Or are you going to come and physically do it? So it becomes that less open and honest conversation that I do think genuinely has an impact on kind of still finding that connection under the independence. So that's why these two quotes kind of stuck out. So it's a little bit of maybe a start of a like sad girl summer. No, just really it's that I can, we can do all of these things and we can accomplish all these things, but sometimes it is much harder and we don't always talk about it or give enough time or reflection of when we need to ask for help. Just even having that moment to ask for help, learn how to kind of continue to exist in that with the idea of delegation as well as asking for help, but not, I think again, it's easier said than done. And that becomes the mental gymnastics of, well, I can do it myself, but could I just share along with somebody else in that kind of capacity? And that's even just telling them what you accomplished, what you didn't accomplish, whether it's perfect or not. So that's kind of my idea and thoughts on it. So we're going to move into that independence mind map. And then we're going to do the rosebud thorn reflection, which is going to be on page 36. And then we're going to do those weekly setup pages, which are going to be on page 40 and 41. And so we'll get right into the independence mind map. So if this is your first social, this mind map is something that is unique to the weekly setups. It is our opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into the themes. Recently, that's been really great, not only because I think they're great opportunities to reflect kind of with what you need in that particular week. You can kind of purpose and reframe the question, but it's also led to some really magical conversations in the chat that I have found really inspiring and just really interesting, everyone's thoughts and perspectives on this. So I think this has just been another great idea. And so if you have already created your mind map, that's going to be on a blank page or turn to whatever section you are on. Just make sure you do that. And then we can set up those different sections. If you haven't set it up, we do include the previous weeks, but you don't feel like you need to catch, can just be notes that you include, but they're always there if you need them, and you can just jot them down because you do have the whole week to kind of look at these different questions. And so for week one, we looked at the conforming kind of component of independence. And so that question is there. And for week two, I am going to refer to it as solitude. And so the question is, consider a time when you spent time alone. What did you learn about yourself in that solitude? I would say this is like a proverbial solitude, or it could be an actual kind of by yourself moment. Did you discover new strengths, identify areas for growth, or gain clarity on a particular issue? If spending time alone is challenging for you, what is the one way you can intentionally create a moment of solitude this week and observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment? Huh. So like I said, I feel like that was a really tough one. And that's just because I have maybe a slightly different perspective when it comes to solitude. But the first three bullets on the left are the ones from that directly. And then the other questions I'm thinking of is, do you find handling these situations easier or more challenging as you come across them? And then I was like, is some of the ideas of solitude a response or is that the actual root cause? because in line with kind of what I was talking about on the independence side of kind of my thoughts this week, the kind of solitude side of like, I can absolutely be the person that it's like in solo travel. I just tripped down to London for the night to see a show this past weekend. So it was like solo travel is something that I do without even thinking, without even thinking anything weird about it. It's usually when someone else reminds me that I'm doing it by myself, that's when those ideas creep in. Because I feel like once you kind of make that decision to do something yourself, no one quite talks about the mental and emotional gymnastics that you do on the back end of that, where that becomes so second nature. It almost becomes too easy that it becomes almost difficult to then kind of start sharing those ideas. And I do think it's another one of those the kind of quote that I think of is the like being what is it? The being alone but not lonely, kind of that idea. And so I think that's kind of where we are with the solitude thing. But I think it's one of those like you see how that can adjust. Solitude will look a little bit different during different milestones, different chapters, different experience level. So I think it is certainly an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper. I definitely had to sit and kind of with those slightly negative thoughts of kind of what all that entailed, where it's like I confidently do this a lot, but I feel like there's so much more that creeps in at night when you're by yourself or you're thinking all of those things. And it just becomes challenging. And I think it's a really great opportunity to maybe take less of, even my opinion, like to take a very optimistic and positive thought on these. But this one took a little bit of the less positive and optimistic thought, which isn't a bad thing. That is just what I wanted to kind of process with my map question for this week. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. If you want to share it, I'm going to play a few songs and we'll see you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. I loved reading all of the different responses, but I did see a little bit of consistency when it was everyone appreciates the solitude moment to recharge or refresh or kind of just be with you. And it's that break. But then I said, for every one of those moments, there's certainly longer, the extended moments, or I think Courtney brought it up in that where it's like you're around people that are with other people and you're there by yourself. That is, I think, when it really starts to become a little bit glaring. And while I know, like I said, I can usually put on a brave face in those situations, but sometimes it just gets a little bit trickier to handle. And then you're like, well, I can't let it take away from the event that I'm attending or the thing I'm doing because I'm glad that I'm here. I'm enjoying it. But I think it just proves that this is certainly a complicated thought process. But I think, again, it also leads so much to some of the previous ones with the what is going to energize you, what's going to add to your vitality, how do you refresh, how do you recharge, how do you take that moment to then be a better version of yourself. And a lot of times it is this moment of solitude where it's like, I just can't people today. I can't go outside because there are people. And so I love that idea with that. But and again, we know it's all different ways of different getting to do all those things, but I think it's a really, really good prompt to look at for this week. And I think it did play well on the conforming. So I do think these are always really, really kind of the aha moment that I kind of need sometimes. So thank you everybody for sharing. So we're going to roll right into that reflection on page 36 in your July journal. And so this is our opportunity to, as the little toad says, do the rain laundry, separate those thoughts into lights and darks, or an opportunity to separate the week into those roses, those buds, and those thorns. So again, we're on page 36 in your July journal. The rose is the opportunity to acknowledge something that made you happy, made you smile. It was a highlight. The bud is something that you're looking forward to, something that you're excited about, an emerging opportunity that you haven't quite figured out if it's going to be a rose or a thorn and how you need to prepare for it. Um, and then the thorn is something that is just taking up too much time, energy, or effort in your brain, in your body, in your soul, or even, something that just didn't go so well, a speed bump and something that wasn't great. And then I do appreciate the ability to kind of see all of these together on that seesaw because I love the duality of it. But I think it's always one of those. It's good to acknowledge and hold a moment for all the things that has transpired, and so you can either leave it in last week or you can carry some of that momentum into the next. So for example, my rose, so that highlight of the week, I did go to for the weekend for the weekday. I went and saw a show at the Royal Albert Hall. Albert Hall has been a bit on my bucket list since I was probably single digits. So going back 30 years. So I was so excited to go see this. And if you came to previous socials, it was my bud. I got to see Jeremy Jordan perform. So it was an amazing concert. It was an amazing venue, and it was everything that I wanted it to be. And then to continue with my musical theater nerdiness, my bud, I'm going to go see Footloose this stage show, and I haven't seen that one also in ages. It was one of those cassette tapes that I remember in the car because it was one of those things sister and I kind of could emerge and, comment on what we were either listening to or not listening to. We couldn't agree on it. Our family could always agree on the Footloose cassette tape. So huge Footloose fan. Love the stage show. Super excited to see that on Friday. And then the thorn, kind of as I alluded to with ironically the solitude. So I came up with this first and then did everything in but I just had that moment of like, I miss my friends. And it's one of those, I have friends there, but it's always different. And I have lived, different time zone of my like really close friends. But it was just that moment of like, as I was going to the show, I'd be like, oh, my sister would really like this, or my friend Sarah would really like this, or, I have those type of moments because I would plan these type of things when we were together, when we were in college, post college. And so these were shenanigans that I just agreed to do. And I usually had someone to kind of go along with me. So it was the comment was made, are you going by myself or going by yourself? And it just kind of hit me in the not so great way. So that was kind of my thorn. But again, we're on page 36. If you would like to share your rosebud thorns, or at least take the next couple of minutes to work on this, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And even as we move through the different sections, please feel free to continue to share in the chat if you want any of your kind of thoughts and feelings on the previous responses or the previous questions, previous prompts. I just have to be a little bit acknowledge the time constraint that we have. But what I think is really special about the Rosebud Thorn theme is I always like to use it as a litmus test of what kind of attitude am I going to have going into this next week. And a lot of that is because was I able to find a rose pretty quickly? How big is the bud that I'm getting excited about? Or even again, how tricky is the thorn to potentially solve? Because I do think some of these like feelings, the feeling ones, or even as Bailey say, the crunchy thoughts and feelings that lead to thorns, I find those trickier to get out of my head, even as I started. But the idea to be able to celebrate those roses, get excited about those buds, but then acknowledge, especially with this group, kind of the extra support, or even just the release of being able to put it out into the universe. This is what happened. This is how I feel about it. And I either can put it on a shelf and come to it a different day, or I can throw it out there and not look at it again. So I love the idea to do about that. So thank you everybody for sharing. So now we're going to move to those weekly planner pages. So this is going to be page 40 and 41 in your July journal. And we are going to start at the top and go through it. That's because the way my particular brain works is I like to connect all of these sections together to help provide a little more support to the kind of end goal, my end idea for my week. Because I am a planner, I have to have a plan B, an A, a B, a C, all the way down to a Z if I need to. So it's one of those, I always like to have a plan. I have to have a contingency plan. I have to have safety nets. I have to have multiple opportunities. So if I can kind of give as much support to whatever goal or idea I have for that week, that's what I am going to do. But there is no right or wrong way to set up your pages, just like there is no right or wrong way to a journal. Sometimes I feel like, again, best thing to do is to ask yourself, what do I need? And sometimes that is just the easy question to ask, but you'll get so many different answers because maybe you need to put yourself first this week. Maybe you need to embrace some of those solitude ideas and events. Maybe you just need to drink more water. Maybe you need to spend a little bit more time in nature. Maybe you need to prioritize some of those follow-up calls. Maybe you need to put aside some of these other things. Maybe you just need to switch off for a while. So I've become a fan of this particular graph because it's like, what do you need? So it's like, do I need? And then you can answer that. So it's that kind of fill in the blank moment. So that's how I always structure this because sometimes what you need, the page is exactly as written. Sometimes you need to build those different building blocks to help support all of the ideas. And sometimes you need something completely different. And sometimes you need to take a break from some of the sections. And so that is kind of why I always like to ask, what do you need? So we're going to start at the top of the page with this week I want to feel, because I use this as my end goal. Goal oriented, obviously recovering perfectionist, so to speak. So I want to know what my end goal is going to be. And so I have the rosebud thorns that I get to acknowledge, but as I am experiencing those during the week, there's usually one end goal of how I want to feel because this is my opportunity to take that intentional ownership of the week ahead. And sometimes I want to feel as relaxed as the giraffe reading a book on the beach. That's kind of where my head is right now because that's where I'd like to be. But sometimes it is 1% better. It is 5% happier, 10% healthier. I love being able to use that. And sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's a phrase, sometimes it's a version of it. Sometimes it's a sticker, sometimes it's less something, more of something. But being able to feel all these. I'm already seeing some in the chat. Gratitude for me and Andrea, that's lovely. Abundant, that's good from Alexandria. Calm, want to feel brave, hopeful, and maybe it is a sticker, maybe it's a doodle, maybe it's a picture. Feel connected, feel present. I appreciate some of those. And then I've brought back, because I feel like it's a summer vibe, the cute little manatee in a flower crown, because maybe that's what we need to feel like, the attitude of a happy little manatee in a flower crown. I feel like that's, again, a different type of attitude. So being able to come up with these different ideas or that type of way to do it. But this may not be the thing that you want to tackle first. One of our other facilitators, Bailey, suggested that maybe this is based on all of the other pieces that we put together later in this social. Maybe you look at all those and then be like, oh, this is how I think I'm going to feel, or this is what I want to feel based on these circumstances. So it becomes your kind of summary of the week. Or maybe you just need a break from this particular section. But now that we have this kind of idea that we maybe want, or that we're still thinking of with the feeling, wanting to feel excited, wanting to feel productive, I start to see that, especially when we hit summer, is that need to feel connected, need to feel productive, feeling calm, trying to get a little bit back into a routine, but even sometimes just feeling like you need a break, you need to refresh, you need to do all those things. Rested, love it. And so now I'm going to keep talking on these sections. So we're still on page 40. And now we've got our weekly major three goals. These can be the major three goals, the minor three goals. These can be two goals, one goal, no goal. But I use these as those mental and emotional reminders of what I need to feel the way I want to feel this time next week. And so sometimes that's putting them into categories. Maybe you have a mind, a body, and a soul category. Maybe it's embracing the creative, capable, and carefree side of things. And don't worry, as I'm going through all these examples, I will stop talking at some point and I will go back to all of these slides. But if you need me to go back to one, let me know. Maybe it is the choose novelty, release stagnation, and cultivate learning. Maybe it's missing some of the theme. I, for one, again, I've gotten more sleep, so that means I've been reaching less for the caffeinated drinks and drinking more water. So I consider that a win. So that's been a pretty consistent goal of mine this past couple of weeks, and I'm going to keep it that way because I am, again, a creature of habit. So a lot of my goals tend to stay the same. So I like those things. And so maybe you have one very specific goal that you want to work on. I know Quinn, who's one of our regular socialers, she had this larger one of planning, make a plan to go back to school. That was her major goal. And so then her to-dos were going directly to those to support that. This is an opportunity to kind of zoom out or even zoom in. So I love that concept. And again, we love to put anything on a bingo board. That gamification is always a fun way to tackle it, especially if you need something a little different. Or you can go for the Silk and Sonder Tridecan, that bottom left, where they are embracing these three different things that are supporting the mind, body, and soul category that are linked directly to the three to-dos to support those different goals, all in a bingo board. So you can kind of go to that like advanced support system, as I think. And then maybe it's the weekly affirmations, maybe it's quotes or kind of that type of idea. You don't quite know what you need, but you think this is going to be helpful or inspirational. And then you can overlay the to-dos. And Maya, I did think of you with this just particular picture because you're one of the cat ladies. I'm a dog person, but I loved this spot for the to-dos. Um, because I feel like this is also those things. I start to flit around of like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this. And then you stand there and you've got different things going on and you're like, wait, what do I need to do? I've had one of those moments of just something in my hand and being like, what was I going to do with this? So for those weekly to-dos, maybe it is a to-do list. Maybe it's a to-do list. I'm a to-do list fan just because I love the celebration. But I have been leaning into do, decide, delegate, or delete, which is that Eisenhower matrix. And I think again, this is what maybe has me more fixated on the idea of independence kind of concept. So I may actually sit the Eisenhower matrix out for this week just because I think it's helping with that. Or it's encouraging that kind of mental funk that I'm finding myself in around kind of the independence of all this. But for me in particular, I do try to delegate a lot. I've been celebrating a lot of my delegation. I'm really appreciated what I consider cooking shortcuts or cooking hacks, back to delegations. Same thing, I don't delete anything I do, which, like I said, I think that's the mindset that I've embraced, but I don't think that's helping with the idea of independence. So, like I said, I think I'm going to shelve Eisenhower Matrix this week. Um, And then you can always have different ideas for each day, different to-dos for each day. Maybe it's just recategorizing them or reframing them on the to-dos of the things that you need versus the things that you want to do. Or maybe it gets a big old sticker and it just gets shelved for that particular week. Or maybe even broken down into the weekly to-bes instead of the to-dos, which is that slightly more optimistic approach to kind of take. Or maybe you want to break down your work to-dos and your personal to-dos or even your family to-dos into that need and want category. So I know that was a lot. I'm gonna play a song and we'll see you soon. Okay, thank you for so we're still going to stay on page 40 and moving to that activity section. And like I said, I'm a creature of habit. I carry over stuff from my monthly habit tracker. Those are the things that I want to do every single day. But then I add this lens of reality that I like to call it, which allows me to set aside how much time I think I can realistically dedicate to my habits. So I enjoy this. The way you can approach this is you absolutely target those things that you want in your routine, and you can either put goals with them or leave them without goals. And again, maybe it's those things that you really want to focus on. Maybe it's a routine that you're wanting to embrace, or maybe it is just the time that you want to allocate for those habits and activities that help with your vitality, that help you refresh, that help give you that inspiration. Or it can also be something that I know I've used to also a little bit of a journal slump. I will use this as the habits and activities of how I want to connect with my journal. So I will spell it out as one activity is going to be spend some time, 5, 10 minutes on a coloring page, work some of the prompts, attend a social, reconnect with my intentions, focus on whatever tracker I have set up. Um, Look at a bucket list item, kind of incorporate some of those. So I've started, I repurposed my expense tracker. That's my adventure list and my bucket list, which I'll see a little bit later. So that I think, yeah, or maybe these are habits that you want to stop, or maybe you're headed on vacation, or you just have a lot going on and you want to be more present. And so you're just putting a sticker over this and be like, I actually don't need this week. And again, just because there are five doesn't mean you need to have five habits. Maybe it's one, two, or three. Don't worry, I will go back to all those slides because it is my favorite. The quote. And then I always like to incorporate a 5 data schedule each month. 2 weeks ago, my focus was on learning because I needed to catch up for school. Last week was a reset day, and or it was more of a reset week, and everything from just like cleaning out my work email, kind of filing all those things away. And I think for me, it's going to be a little bit leaning more into the self-care day, making sure that I'm staying hydrated, that I am doing all the things. It's been hot, but I really haven't had a good focus on the self things. So I may embrace that this week. And then again, my iconography, if it doesn't give it away when you need a rest, maybe here are some ideas to incorporate for that. Here were some Silk and Sonder things that shared for cozy summer activities. I would sit for the weekend. Still got a little bit of the weekend left, or we can at least start planning for the weekend to come. Or here's some more to-do lists. I thought it was fun. The one on the right is actually from someone I follow on social media that's Australian. So there, obviously, it is winter in the Southern Hemisphere, but I thought it was a fun take on winter in July, even though obviously the last thing I want to do is put on a sweater. But I thought there were still just some fun ideas. And I think it was some other habits in the was embracing that month. So I think some of these could be really fun to incorporate as well. So I'm going to give you some time to work on all this. We'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Loved the conversation and loved all of the inspiration that we provide. Some of these very simple ideas, but things that, again, we are already incorporating or things that we want to do. I think it adds to a little bit of excitement. And so now we're going to move over to page 41 in your July journal. So we're flipping that page. I lovingly refer to it as the B side because I like to, I'm a music person. So I diligently complete the page that we just did every single week. That would be the A side. But then there are some amazing gems that live over on the B side, but it is not necessarily something that I use on a regular basis. So we have the meal plan, and it is a great template. And so what I love about it is you can absolutely use it as a meal plan. You can use it either as something that you plan ahead for or something that you do in real time as more of a tracker. I always hate to use the word tracker because I feel like we got a lot of trackers and we need to have a tracker for our tracker, but really that's the best way to describe it. It's you can call it a log, but the past military person in me thinks I have a different thought on logs. So maybe you want to use it more as your meal plan for the. So this is where you put some of those prompts, journal prompts. This is maybe your daily doodle or just a creative outlet moment. You can you can do a haiku, you can do a poem, you can do just an exploration of an affirmation or a quote. You can copy the Silk and Sonder app affirmations in there. And then I definitely use this as a clothing planner, especially when I'm traveling. I use it to plan what I'm going to wear, what I'm going to bring, what things can I rewear so that I don't overpack. I'm an overpacker when it comes to shoes. I managed to go this little event to a dressy event, walking around with one pair of shoes, so I'm thrilled. Or maybe it's where you put your kind of habit stacking ideas. Maybe this is where you put family plans or kind of those things. And then that can lead into the mind body health plan, another something that you can either plan for or track in real time. And you can embrace the National Day of, or maybe it's the alliteration of the Thoughtful Reflection Thursdays, Frustration Free Fridays, Self Care Sundays. And then I saw Nathania in the chat, but I do like going back to that kind of mental check in with the what do I need? And it's do I need this? But the idea of I feel this, so therefore I need this, it's a way to kind of do that quick but very meaningful check in with yourself each day to make sure that you are meeting those demands. As again, we're dealing with that independence of finding that moment of what do I need to help kind of myself at the moment and prioritize myself. Maybe more of the bucket list ideas. It's those things that you want to do. Maybe this is where your reading log sits. Maybe this is where you actually respond to the mind map questions. I also, again, like the fun iconography. Someone asked where I got mine. I get them off social media. I'm an Instagram fan, and I did kind of a little bit of a refresh of my Instagram pages. So I found more fun things. Kind of picked and choose those, but I do always like these. That's how I find them. Just so freaking cute. Very helpful, powerful reminders. So highly recommend some of these different Instagram accounts to follow just to bring a little bit of color and sass and maybe bright moments in your social media feed. And then you have the shopping list, and that can be something that this is maybe where your bingo board lives. Maybe this is where your self-care reminders are. Maybe this is what you actually do to plan for what shopping you need to get done to either support your meal plan or your mind body health plan. Maybe it is a buy, don't buy, those type of things. Again, I use mine, excuse me, when I use this page, I use it as, again, that clothing packing plan. This is where I include the random things that I would need to bring. So that would be the chargers, the adapters, the books. If I'm traveling for work, it's got to be business cards, those type of things. So this section gets used very much hand in hand, in my opinion, with that meal plan. And again, I still say summers are busy in the holidays. So if you maybe want to take to do that social check-in, this is a great way to do it as well. Or here are some more go board ideas. So I am going to give you some time to work on the page, and we will see you soon for the closing. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. And then we have that very last section, which is the I am loving, which I think is always really fun. It is what I consider a bright spot on my page to then put in all the things that I'm loving. As I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Jeremy Jordan. So that has been playing nonstop on my Spotify. So I love that Spotify encourages my ability to listen to exactly what I want when I want to. And then also this page, I also love the currently page. I highly recommend working on it. It's page 39. I'm a storyteller. I love reading stories, telling stories, all those things. So because there are magically 3 lines, I do this page at the beginning, the middle, and the end of each month. So now I have an amazing story of what my month looked like, but I know it can be a little daunting and a little scary because there's no instructions and it's a lot of blank page, but I think it is so worthwhile. I absolutely love this page, probably more than I should, but it always makes me really happy. And then, as always, I cannot believe we reached the end, but we would love to continue the conversation in the Silk and Sonder app. And we love to get all of your inspiration from your pages if you want to share them. It's always so much fun and so great to again get all of the inspiration there. We have some upcoming events on Tuesday. This is a free mid-year check-in event and demo. Highly recommend potentially attending. There are going to be some pretty good prompts when it comes to the mid-year check-in. And same thing with this is the exclusive that's announced for next week, not this week, but coming on the one after July 24th. And the Truity is kind of the personality type test expert. So it's a way to kind of focus in on those type of things. So I think it's a great opportunity to embrace that a little bit. And then this is going to be a copy of my playlist. I will also include the Spotify link in the chat. Maya is also putting some of those links there. And we are so glad that you joined us. I could not spend a weekend without each and every one of you. But I know we are going to have a great rest of our day. We're going to have a great rest of our week. And I hope to see you at a future event. And I hope you have a great day, and we will see you soon. Bye.